With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shekalim Daf Chaf Aleph. We are going to first continue the discussion about the Minchas Chavitim that is brought after the passing of a Kohen Gadol, pending the appointment of a new Kohen Gadol. So we learned in the Mishnah, aside of out of whose pocket does the Minchas Chavitim come from, but the Mishnah says that Ushleima Hoisa Kereva, that unlike the Minchas Chavitim brought while the Kohen Gadol is alive, that the amount of the Korban Mincha is divided into two halves, half in the morning, half in the afternoon. It's brought Shlema. We're going to analyze exactly how do we apply that halacha. We're going to, God willing, start today the 8th chapter, the final chapter of Shekalim, chapter Kol Harukin. We're going to start the chapter speaking with some halachas of Tum and Tara. So first of all, spittle and some other bodily liquids of a zav, of a zava, and of a nida have the status of an avhatuma. The Chachamim went ahead and said that all spittle of unknown origin shall be presumed tamei. This is a derabanan, and it's not because the roiv of spittle is coming from a zav or a nida. No, but since there is what we would call a sizable minority that does originate from those people. So if you don't know where it came from, you have to presume a tuma. Now that's a very chamur dikatuma derabanan, because we are presuming that the spittle has the status of an av, which means it could be metama, even Adam and Caleb. However, we will begin the Perek by learning that there is an exception to the rule. Spittle that's found in Yerushalayim, being that there is less people that are tamei in Yerushalayim, we don't have this derabanan, we don't presume that it's tamei. However, even in Yerushalayim itself, there will be exceptions. There will be locations in Yerushalayim, as we'll see in the Mishnah, that we will impose on spittle that's found of unknown origin, this derabanan dika tuma. And something very similar, the Mishnah will discuss, we find regarding kalim, utensils that are left unattended. Now here, the keli doesn't become an av, but maybe a source of tuma, an avatuma, had contact with the keli, and the Rabbanan said that unattended kelim are presumed to be tamei, because there is a sizable minority of people that are tamei and that might have conveyed tuma, therefore, to the keli. And here again, the Mishnah is going to point out that Yerushalayim is an exception to this rule, that unattended kelim in Yerushalayim are not to be presumed tamei. And here again, in Yerushalayim itself, we will have some exceptions. On Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, we're going to review a sugya that we just had recently in Psachim regarding the question of dam of an avela. The flesh of an avela, the flesh of a carcass of an animal that either is an impure animal or a pure animal that died without shchita, conveys tumah. Kazayis, basar, nevelas, matame. Other parts of the carcass, like the hide, like the bones, do not convey tumah. What is the status of blood from a nevela? So that will be the discussion, and ultimately leading into a machlokes tanoim, and subsequently a machlokes amoraim. And towards the end of Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, we're going to learn about some amazing details regarding the curtains in the Beis Hamikdash. The Mishnah is going to be focusing primarily on the double curtain that separate the Kodesh from the Kachim Kachim. But we also remember, we just learned that really in the Beis Hamikdash, we had a total of 13 curtains and much, much more. Let us start on Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph. We left off 6 lines from the top of the Amid. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yoisa Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yoisa says that Rabbi Yochanan Ba'ai, he asked the following question. Again, going back to the Mishnah, that after the passing of a Kohen Gadol, before we appoint a new Kohen Gadol, the Minchas Chavitim is brought on a daily basis. But the Mishnah says the words Shleima Haisa Kereva, it was brought wholesome, it was not divided into 2 halves. So what does that mean? What are the 2 options? Mahu. Do we say option number 1, Shleima B'Shachris, Vishleima Ben Harbayim, that mamish double was brought, all of it in the morning, and again another entire Minchas Chavitim in the afternoon, or Shleima B'Shachris, all of it is brought in the morning, but Ubetela Ben Harbayim, and nothing needs to be brought in the afternoon. This is the boya that Rabbi Yochanan said. And now the Gemara is going to extend this inquiry. So in Talmud Bavli, we would now say Imtim Soloimer. Here in Yerushalmi, it says like this: Kad tehei pshitale, that if you will resolve this inquiry by saying that it's brought twice a day, in other words, we mamish double the amount of flour, all of it shleim in the morning, and again all of it in the afternoon. And why would we say that? Because since it says the chsiv minchas tamid, the word tamid is written regarding the chavite kohen gadol. The word tamid is written regarding the carbon tamid that we all know. Carbon tamid is brought b'shachris ubein harbayim, and therefore, if we're going to say because of this, let's say gzeira shava, or because of this hekesh, it is doubled. So what about the other parts that come with the minchas chavite kohen gadol? It comes with 3 loig of oil. So do we say at least the loig could be divided, or the loig is doubled? Shloishes lugin mahein. Do we say again shloishes lugin shachris, the shloishes lugin bein harbayim? You mamish double the amount of oil as we double the amount of flour, or no? That takad shleima haisa kereva goes regarding the flour. Tami that it's brought twice. But at least the oil can be divided in half. Now says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chizkiya, Uf Hada Tzirichalei, Oy Bazoi, based on the above inquiries, I would like to inquire about a third thing, which is Shnei Kaimtzin Mahin. The Levina is brought with the Minchas Chavite Kohen Gadol. How much Levina, guys? We had this above, the amount that fits into the kaimitz of a kohen. So here again, my question will be that do we bring shnei kumsin b'shachar v'shnei kumsin ben arbayim? If we're bringing, they brought half of the kohen gadol takes his flour, he divides it in half, and with 1/2 he brings 1 kaimitz. Now that we are saying, look, kula alma, that shleima haisa kareva for sure in shachris. So what do we do with the kaimtzin? Do we also double the amount of levina, which means 2 kmitza amounts of levina in the morning, and again 2 kmitzas in the afternoon? Or even though that you're going to bring 2 kaimtzin, but oy kaimitz achas b'shachas, for kaimitz achas bein harbayim. So a very similar question to the oil, says Chizkiya, just like you're asking regarding the oil, I'm asking regarding the kaimitz of levina. Amar Rabbi Yoisa, no, that is not a question. Klum lamdu l'kaimitz leimim minchas chayta. What's the source that we bring the amount of a kaimitz of levina? It's from the normal mincha, the minchas chayta. So ma'ala hala. Now here we have in the Yerushalmi so many girsois. We're not going to be goyed as the word sheni. Malahal, when it's only 1 kaimitz, you only bring 1 kaimitz at a time. So here I know Afghan, it's going to be a total of 2 kaimitz. A total of 2 kaimitz means 1 kaimitz at a time. And really that's why he's telling like Chizkiya, your third inquiry is not a boya. We're going to skip the parentheses. And Chizkiya says, no. My third inquiry is a boya. Amalei Rabbi Chizkiya to Rabbi Yoisa, hold on. If that would be a logic, then why did they ask a question regarding the oil? I should have said the same thing. Klum lamdu shleishes lugin loy mitavan shalbein arbayim, and malahalan shleishes lugin afkan. The total should be shleishes lugin, but we don't fully compare it to taman shalbein arbayim. Omatam, and just like regarding the oil, tzricha means you found it important to make the inquiry, because since we see that there is a doubling of the flour, maybe Hashem wants us to double the oil. So therefore, we're right to ask the same kasha regarding the levina, and these questions remain unresolved. Okay, weiter, the Gemara continues, referring back to the Mishnah. Now we are going to the part of the Mishnah that says that one of the 7 enactments of Beis Din was that a person should not violate Me'ilah if one made use of the ashes of the Paraduma. That was a Takanas Beis Din. Shelo yiyachulei. So says the Gemara that Rab Shimon bar Nachman in the name of Rabbi Yochanan says that Bedin hoyo shemei alaba, that the Mishnah is implying if Beis Din made up an enactment, what does that imply? Without the Beis Din, really, if someone benefited from the ashes, they should be chayiv me'ilah, with all of the consequences that if you use it inadvertently, you have to not only give back the value to the temple, but you have to add the halachic fifth, and you have to bring a korban me'ilah. Elama v'hein gozru shloim alaba. That's what the Mishnah is saying. It's only that Beis Din found it important to take away that takana. Now that is very problematic. Why is that? Because we learned befedish in a braisa regarding the ashes of the red heifer that the Torah calls in Parshas Chukas with the word chatos, and the Tana says malamed shemoy alim ba. That the fact, even though it's not slaughtered in the Beis Hamikdash, it's a whole unique type of offering. It's not, you can say it's not a korban. No, the Torah calls it a chatos, says the braisa to teach you that you chayiv me'ilah in it. So it's medayik the Gemara, the braisa says ba moyalim, but that implies ve'ei moyalim ba'afra. Biblically, there is no me'ilah, and that appears to contradict what our Mishnah is implying, that it's only takanas based in that there is no me'ilah. So to resolve that, Amar Ababo, let me tell you what it is. Barashayna nishwali haya mishtak shekin ba. People would debase the ashes of the red heifer. How would they debase it? One of the ways people healed skin wounds is that they would put ashes on their wound. And by the way, if you remember, and we learned this from the Rambam, that there is a rabbinic problem with that, because then it's ki'ilu you're making a ksoivas kaka, because then the color of the ashes becomes like permeated on your skin. But take that aside. People would use ashes for healing reasons. People sometimes would take the ashes of the red heifer. And why did they do that? Because what the Braisa is saying is correct. When the Braisa says that there's me'ilah, but there's no me'ilah with the ashes. Now, of course, one should not use these precious ashes for such a purpose. People were using it. So it was Vigazru, the Chachamim said, interesting, a rabbinic me'ilah, she'yimo aluba. The Chachamim says, whoa, you're chayiv me'ilah. Oh, the moment the Chachamim said that, no one touched those ashes for anything other than using it, right, to take away tumas meis. And kivin shenigderu, once their gezeda was effective, that people no longer were using the ashes for their own mundane purposes. So now, so now that was our Mishnah. They went back to bring things the way they are, mida oiraisa. And finally, we had in the Mishnah of Allah Kinan. So if there was something lost or some bird became disqualified from the Kinan box, so the person who put the money there might not even know that. So that bird, that korban has to be replaced. Who replaces it? So what we have in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi said that they made up that whoever supplied the Beis Hamikdash with those birds, they needed to go out of pocket if a bird needed to be replaced. So says the Gemara, now this will help us understand something that we just learned in the previous Perek. When we learned about, remember the coins that were found in between the boxes. So if you had coins that were found in between the kinin and the goizli oilo, lechachamim, that say that the kinin box had in it obligation karbanis. So the Mishnah only was speaking about which box do you put the coin in. And the Mishnah says you put it into goizli oilo. We had this before. So then the kasha is, okay, Vern, you resolve the money, but what about the person? And Hoisha hazois b'mayim iskaperes. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak tonight based in who that hamasapik es hakinim, who masapik es hapsulois and the avudois. It goes together. Our Mishnah spoke about psulois. That sugya spoke about avudois. It's the same shita. And with this we say that hadrin Allah pedic moishin imtzu. We will return to you pedic shvi. And now we are starting the final pedic in Shekalim, the 8th chapter called Harukin. And Chavra, as we spoke out in the intro, there's a very important klalim that when you have spittle from people that have a status of an av, because tuma was yotze megufam, so let's speak about a zav and a zava, but it's really also a nida. So their spittle is an av. And we also learned it's not only spittle, it's not anybody liquid, but anybody liquid that first gathers in their body. And then it is expelled like urine has a status of an av, and the example that we use is spit, roik. Now, if you find on the street or anywhere spittle and you don't know where it came from, midoy raisa, right? You have a concept of linen basaruba. The Chachamim imposed a rabbinic tuma. You don't know where the spittle came from. Midrabanan, you have to assume it came from a zav. That's a very strong rabbinic tuma. However, the Chachamim did not impose this tuma in Yerushalayim because people were more cautious about the status of their tahara in Yerushalayim. It's not that there were no tummy people in Yerushalayim, but the sizable minority that inspired this rabbinic law was not found in Yerushalayim. And now the Mishnah is going to say, but there were locations in Yerushalayim where the Rabbanan was in effect. Let's read the Mishnah. Kol harukin hanamtsoim b'Yerushalayim are not like rukin that are found elsewhere that are tamei midrabanan on a level of an av, but they are tohirin. However, there is an exception to the exception, which is chutz mishuk ha'elyon. There was an upper marketplace. And the Gemara is going to explain exactly why there was a larger amount, a greater amount of tuma in the Shuka Elyon. And therefore, if you find spittle and you touched it and you don't know where it came from, then midrabanan, imagine the person is a Rishon. These are the words of Rav Meir, because the spittle is enough. Rabbi Yossi Omer, that in Yerushalayim, he disagrees with Rav Meir. There is enough tuma for you to decree the general rabbinic law that a spittle of unknown origin is tamei midrabanan, even in Yerushalayim. However, a little bit lenient. He's a lot more machmer than Rav Meir, but he says like this: B'shar kol yimai sashana in Yerushalayim, if you find spittle sheba emsa in middle of the road, and we presume that people who are tamei will walk in middle of the road, and as the Gemara will clarify, that it's about the roiv and the miut. When the majority of the people are not careful about their status of tum and tara, so we presume most people are tamei, so the roiv go in the middle. The people that are in the minority, they go to the sides. The minorities go to the back, they go to the sides. So in the middle of the road, then you have to assume that the spittle is tamei. Just remember, it's not that roiv people are tamei, but there is a sizable minority of people that are tamei, which is why the Chachamim made that takana. And Shevet Tzdadim, this is Rabbi Yossi during the entire year. Here he's takamayda that in Yerushalayim, in the Tzdadim, the people that walked were people that were very careful about the tum and tara status, and therefore there is no rabbinic law, and the spittle that's found is tohirin. That more people were cautious about their tum and tara status, so we say the opposite. Sheba emsa, the spittle that you find in the middle of the road, which means it came from people that walked the middle of the road, they are tohirin. Sheba tzadadim are tameim. Mepnei shahamuatim, the Mishnah says, mistalken letzadadim, that the minority are those who walk to the sides of the road. Very similar to this rabbinic tuma on spittle of unknown origin is the same regarding kalim that were left unsupervised. Not that you don't know who their owners are. You can know who the owner is. You left a keli unsupervised. How do you know that someone tamei did not touch it? Someone who has the level of an av, who can be metama midoiraisa keli. Maybe the keli is a rishon. And indeed, again, the Chachamim said that kelim that are left unattended are tamei. The Chachamim did not impose that on Yerushalayim. People are more cautious in Yerushalayim. So generally, kelim that are found in Yerushalayim are presumed to be tahirin. However, you have what we will call today keli mikva'os. In the times of Chazal, they had dafke 2 ways of going into that location, an entry and an exit. They did not want people that are entering with kelim that are tamei to be walking on the same shvil with the people that are exiting the mikvah, because when you're going there with kelim that are tamei, there's tumah there. Maybe the keli will touch something else. Now I know a keli cannot be matama keli, but maybe the keli will touch food. So they made a separate exit. So here what we will call a circumstantial evidence. Even though in Yerushalayim B'chlal they did not impose this derabanan on unintended kelim, but kelim that you find on the path going into the mikvah, there, no, those kelim are coming from people that need it. Now, doesn't mean that this keli was tamei. You don't know that, but there's a higher chance. Kol kelim I'm saying Yerushalayim. Now we have to make a comma. First of all, they are tahirin. They are tahirin. However, if there's a reason why we would think that they are tamei, so if they were found derech chirida lebeis Tefilla, then we say tameim. If they are derech Aliyah, then they're like the rest of Yerushalayim. Then they are tahirin. Because shaloi kiridas and aliyasan, we don't compare these 2 paths together. The only reason why we say that kelim hanamtsoyim derech chirida is because derech chirida is the kelim, the ones who are tamei are being taken out to the mikvah. They were pre-Tefilla. Divrei Rav Meir, Rabbi Yossi Omer. Here, Rabbi Yossi is more lenient than Rav Meir, unlike in the first case in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says no, that kulam tahir, because even though you found the keli on the path leading to the mikvah, how do you know that this was the keli that the person wanted to take to the mikvah? I'll tell you the opposite. If I'm going to the mikvah now, a tefillah keli, and I'm taking this to the mikvah, if it were to fall from my possession, I would find it. Why did the owner forget it? Because he wasn't focusing on that keli. Yeah, he was going there to take other kelim to the mikveh that were tamei, but not the one that he lost. If not, he would have found it. Elamah, there are exceptions, which is kelim that are used for burials, which is a sal, a certain basket that they used. Hamagref is a shovel that they would use. A meritza is a certain hammer that they would use. But which ones of these kelim only hamiyuchadim likvaros? Since they are used for burials, then even though they were found in Yerushalayim, there was a heightened level of separation from Tumah, but still, he says, if you don't know who it belongs to, then you presume that it's tamei. And now the third din that we have in this Mishnah, and this is dinim that we learned in Pesachim, Sakim. You find a knife. Okay, and again, there's a rule that a keli that's left unattended is tamei. And now we're going to learn another exception to this rabbinic tumah. You find a knife that would have been good to shecht the Korban Pesach, that you find it on the 14th day. Here you say that the owner of this knife, no matter who he was, would not have left this keli tamei, being that everyone needs to use it on Yudalit for Shchitas Korban Pesach. Furthermore, just to know another detail, that when a keli does become tamei, when it comes to kachim, or I want to say a detail, hold on, kelim in Yerushalayim are not tamei. When do we say that the Rabbanan did not impose this unintended keli in Yerushalayim? It's not tamei. That's only concerning chulin and even for truma. But for kachim, they did impose. For kachim, it was left unattended. You found it. It's tamei even in Yerushalayim. However, even here there is an exception. If you find it on Yud Daled, if this would have been tamei, you know what would have happened? The owner would have taken it to the mikvah on Yud Gimel, because just mikvah is not enough. You need mikvah, and it has to have a head of shemesh. So he would have taken it the 13th in the day in order for it to be tahira. And therefore, sheichet b'miyad. On the other hand, if you find the knife on the 13th day, even though you found it in Yerushalayim, and again, in Yerushalayim, we don't impose the rabbinic tuman kelim, but we will for kachim. So shayna or not will. Shayna means you have to take it to the mikvah again. In other words, it's not that we know for sure it's tamei, but just to be precautious, midrabanan, take it to the mikvah again, and then you can use it the next day for kachim. However, koifetz, a meat cleaver is dafke not used for the Korban Pesach. People, number one, were able to chef with it, but for that they wouldn't schlep a big cleaver. They would use a knife. You know why people had a meat cleaver? after the shechita to be able to break the animal apart. And being that for Korban Pesach, there is a unique law of not to break the bones. By a chagiga, you can break the bones of a korban. So the koifets, these kalim, they were not used for the Pesach. They were going to be used on the 15th for a chagiga. So the 14th for a koifets, it's like the 13th by a sakin. Koifets, whether you find it on the 13th, whether you find it on the 14th, shoyno matbil. However, if the last line, chol arba ataliyas b'Shabbos, and as we know that midrabanan we may not take kalim to a mikvah on Shabbos, right? Tikkun keli, let's say, even though it's not discernible. So if this koifetz would have been tamei, the owner would have taken it to the mikvah on the 13th, not because he's going to use it on the 14th. No, you don't use it for a Pesach because he wants to have this available for the Chagig on the 15th. So then the koifetz is like a sakin, and shoichet b'mayad, you can presume that it is tohira, daf chaf aleph amid beis. And likewise, if you find the koifetz on the 15th, that's like finding a sakin on the 14th, shoichet b'mayad. Final din on the Mishnah, what happens, nimtzo'ok shura l'sakin, if you have two knives together, one is a sakin, one is a koifetz. What did we learn? That if you find a sakin on the 14th, you can presume, even midrabanan, it's tohira. If you find a koifetz on the 14th, unless it's on Shabbos, you have to presume that it's tamei. If they're both bound together, so our Mishnah says, lekula harehu kesakin, because the owner would not have tied the koifetz to the sakin if not for the fact that the koifetz is pure. We're going to see a shita from a Tanach in the Gemara that says the opposite. You can say both ways. Our Mishnah holds that you put the status of the sakin on the koifetz lekula. Okay, says the Gemara. Rabbi Abin b'shem Rabbi Shoban later. The Rav Meir, who began with the leniency that the rabbinic, you found spittle, kol harukin, you don't know who it came from, you have to presume it's tamei, was not imposed in Yerushalayim. However, even Rabbi Meir says that b'shuka elyon, there it's rabbinically tamei. Why? What exactly was b'shuk ha'elyon in Yerushalayim? So he explains that katzron shal nachrim hayasham, that there was a laundry mat, there was a laundry that was operated by Nachrim. You guys, it's important to remember that even though Tuma on a living being only exists on a Jew, midairaisa, not an animal is Tamei, not a lahavdal, a human being, but also not Tamei when they are alive. Only a Jew is Tamei even while alive. And the rule is that the greater kedusha in something, therefore the more potential tuma in something. However, midrabanan, the Chazal were goyzer, both on male and female goyim, that they should always have a status of a zav and a zav. And that was a takana that they made to create a greater havdalah ben Yisrael la'amim, which means that since midrabanan, the non-Jew is a zav, so is a spittle. So it's like a factual thing that there were the people that were involved in the business of laundering garments. Today, everyone has a machine in their home. It's gavaldik. Then it was a big to-do. So there were locations where you took to a laundry. They were goyim. So there were so many goyim there. So therefore, again, it was a sizable minority to justify the rabbinic law that if you see spittle, you don't know who it came from. You have to presume that it is tamei. That's number one. Number two, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Arudois, arudois means wild donkeys. That where would they kill wild donkeys? That would be in Shuka Elyon. Now it's important here to follow the Girsa of the Gra, right? That's the Aleph. I'm reading inside in the Gra. Amar Rabbi Chanina, arudois hoyu, noicherem sham. They would kill wild donkeys over there. Why would they kill wild donkeys? So he explains. Amar Rabbi Shoban Levi, ma'isa hoyu. That noicher and aruda is the istirati yashal melech. We had this some sachim. So they would feed the king had in the army, Yiddish kings, the tanks or some of the weaponry was they had lions, and those lions needed to be fed. So that was the place where they would kill the donkeys to feed the lions in the service of the king. And that happened once. I'm reading still in the Gra. For hoyo oile regolim mishtaken badam. And sometimes, punkt when Yidden were going to the Beis Hamikdash before a Yom Tiv, there was such a mass slaughter that they were walking up until their knees in the blood of the wild donkeys. They did not touch the carcass of these dead animals. There was no contact with basar nevela, but they walked through the blood. And this will be, we just learned to some sacha, machazara, what's the status of dam? And it's very clear. Basar nevela is matama even in the amount of a kazayis. Many other parts of the animal, like the skin, like the hooves, like the horns, are not matame at all. What's the status of dam? It's a big question. Is dam matame or not matame? Especially speaking about Yidden that are going into Aliyah Saregel. So back in the Gemara, and they shared with them, Chevra, we walked through a lot of blood of dead animals. And the Chachamim didn't say anything. What does that mean? From a non-statement, you also learn a din. If dam of an avela would be metame, then the Chachamim would say, oh, Chevra, you guys have to make sure to go to the mikvah, right? And wait until head of Shemesh before you go into the Beis HaMikdash. No such statement was made to them. Okay, Rab Simon b'shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi adds, Ma'aseh happened once, but Pirda, there was a mule that was part of the household of Rebbe, of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and Shemei died, and some of its blood left its carcass, and obviously it touched either people or kalim, and they had a shaila whether the items that blood had contact with, did it acquire tuma or not? That's really the shaila is dam nevela metame and v'tiharu domeo mishum nevela. They asked the Rav over the household of Rebbe. It wasn't Rebbe. We'll see later. It was Rabbi Yehuda, and he paskined that it was tohira. Now, what does that mean? Doesn't mean because they were paskening that dam nevela b'chlal is not metame. That's option number one. But there's option number two. Could be dam nevela is metame. But just like basar nevela is only metame if it has the size of a kazayis, if it's lesser than that, it cannot convey. Maybe the dam that happened there in that story was so little dam that it wasn't enough to be metame. So says the Gemara that Rabbi Lazar, when he heard that Psak of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that story from Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he asked Rab Simon, at kama, what does it mean? Is it that they were paskening that dam is not metame, or because punkt in that story you had a smaller amount of dam? And Veloy Agive, and Rab Simon did not respond, which was kind of frustrating. So Shaul, the same Rabbi Lazar, went and he went straight to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. And he clarified, no, that only Adre V is taught. The Maisa that happened, the Pirda Shal Beis Rebbe, was not like the story that happened when Yidden were walking through dam of these wild donkeys until their knees. No, that was a lot of dam. That was a much more lenient opinion. Rabbeinu, the Beis Rebbe was not that lenient. They were only metayered because it was less than a revius, meaning Yoser Mikam, it will be Tomei. And that was a very important clarification. Sometimes when you don't answer and people extrapolate a chumrah, it's not the end of the world. Here, he could have understood a kula. So, uvash l'Rabbi Eliezer. It was upsetting to Rabbi Eliezer that what the loy chazar leid Rab Simon shemu also, that Rab Simon didn't clarify what happened, especially he asked him and he was ignored. Similar story extended from the same. That Rav Bibi Havi Yosef and Masna Deinov. Rav Bibi was repeating the story that the Pirda Shal Beis Rebbe that died and V'tiharu Domeho, and he also did not clarify what was the heter that was given there. And Amalei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bisna to Rav Bibi at Kama, same kasha. Is it because they paskened in Beis Rebbe that dam is b'chlal not metame, or is it only because it was lesser than a shiur? And Amalei, and he's asking, he's clarifying his question. Is it only Ad Revi Yistor? But or Yosemikam Tamei, or not, or is it Oistar? And here again, Rav Bibi did not respond. Not only did he not respond, sometimes you just ignore a question. Sometimes, in our case, Rav Bibi got frustrated with Rabbi Yitzchak. So Amalei, Rabbi Zrika witnessed it, and he got upset with Rav Bibi. He says, "I don't understand. The Yid is asking you a shaila. How can you get upset with him?" Only Rab Zrika began to have a shoyloch because he asked you a question at boybe. So to which Rav Bibi defended himself. Rav Bibi said, "Amalei, no. I wasn't upset at him." He says, "I was preoccupied with Parnasa. And begin the loyhavas data be, my mind was not with me. My das was not with me." And as the Amar Abchanim, Now, when it says in Parshas Kisavi regarding the Toichacha, so the pasuk says very heavy words that God forbid that already happened all this, that your very life will be hanging in the balance. What's that? A person's life is hanging in the balance. That's a person that does not own farmland. That is the biggest curse. That's beginning with that, because when you own land, then al piderech hateva, you'll have food. The moment you have to buy food, it's already a klal. That refers to a person, even if he's wealthy enough to afford to buy one-time wheat for the entire year, it's still called a yid that chayecha teloy mechameh, because he doesn't own farmland. Then when the pasuk continues, going from bad to worse, that you'll be frightened by night and by day. That's a person who cannot even afford to buy wheat for the whole year. He can go to a wholesaler, right? He doesn't have to buy it nebach every day, right? It's not hand to mouth, but that's already even worse. And when the pasuk continues, you won't be sure whether you live. That's already that's a person, they call this today, what, a person that's living from paycheck to paycheck. That's the biggest klal. And Va'ano said, Rav Bibi, I'm in that category. I'm samech apaltira. And what kind of great excuse, not that we're looking for excuses, do you even have in Golos? Everyone is in this category. And 95% of people are in this category. But Rav Bibi was saying, because of that, I was focused on my preoccupation of Parnasa, but I wasn't upset at him for asking the question, but my kedoim. So here again, so hey, Rabbi Shua ben Besaida. So here we're quoting a Mishnah in Eduyos, that there he makes a statement, and this is his statement. Dam nevelis is tar. You know what it's mashma? It's tar b'chlal. L'chaydet means it's completely tar. Mal tar melaha. Oh, says the Gemara, no. Don't bring a raya from that Mishnah in Eduyos, because maybe mahu tar, maybe tar over there only means that this dam is not going to be machshir, as we have the klal that in order for produce to become tamei, even if a source of tuma has contact with it, it first needs to become muchshir l'kabel tuma. What makes something susceptible to becoming tamei? It becoming wetted berotzoin with one of the 7 liquids, including dam. However, we also learned why is dam like water, because the Torah says hal ha'aretz tishpechenu kamoyim, and that hal ha'aretz tishpechenu kamoyim only refers to dam that leaves an animal after you slaughter it. That's the pasuk that tells us that you don't have to do the covering of dam by dam behema. Today in a shlachtos you don't cover the behema's dam. By a kaparis, yeah. By dam chaya, yeah. But anyways, which dam is nishpach kamayim? Dam that comes out of the neck when you slaughter it. Dam neveil is not nishpach kamayim, and therefore doesn't have the koyach to be machshir. But maybe l'tama is metamei. So there's no raya from over there. Continues the Gemara Tamam Taninan. Now we're going to quote another potential source from a Mishnah in Machshirin. Dam hasheretz, the blood of a sheretz. We're speaking about dam of one of the shmeina shiratzim. Metamei kibisarei, conveys tuma like its flesh. However, the Mishnah there also says it's only metamei, but it's not machshir. And then the final statement in the Mishnah, the ein lanu kayotzebay, there's nothing like it. Now, what does l'chayda that mean? L'chayda that means the ein lanu. 1 second. L'chayda means that dam nevela is not metame, not metame. Not only not machshir, not metame at all. Again, l'chayda tzaraya, says the Gemara, it's no raya, because maybe it means the ein lanu kayotzebay kishiur tumasei. A sheretz is metame, my friends, even if you only have a piece in the size of a adosha. And the dam of a sheretz is metame also only in the amount of an adosha. Says the Gemara, maybe dam nevela is metame. It's not like dam sheretz, because the shiurim of dam of a nevela is not like the shiur of a basel. By then, the sheretz have the same shiur, adosha. By the nevela, as we learned above, even if you're going to subscribe to the more chamor opinion that dam nevela is metame, how much dam do you need? A revi'is. How much dam do you need from basar? A kezayis. So they don't shear this. They don't have the same shiur. That's the meaning. Avol dame maybe metame kebasar. So bekitzer, we couldn't prove it from the Mishnah in Eduyos. We could not prove it from the Mishnah and Machshirin. Says the Gemara, Tzvili Machlekes Amoraim. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Pli Batrei Amoraim. Chad Amar Tamei, V'chad Amar Tor. Lokula Alma, less than a Revius, will not be Metame. But if you have a Revius, that's the Machlekes. Man the Amar Tamei. That is following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Now this, Rabbi Yehuda is also quoted in Masechta Siduyos, and Rabbi Yehuda quotes the Shita of Beis Hillel that says that Dam Nevela is Metame, Befedish. Uman the Amar Tor is following the Shita of Rabbi Yeshua ben Besoira above that we just learned that is Tahar. And now says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Avduma from the city of Mechaisa. Oh, this is so good now. V'ya'ois. I like it. It's good. Rabbi Yehuda was the machmer. Because Rabbi Yehuda was the Moiraina. He was the Rav Moiraira in the household of the Nasi, in the household of Rebbe. Rabbi Shua ben Levi clarified that even though that they were matir, clearly v'tiharu domeo, they were only matir the dam of the dead mule because it had less than a revis. You know why exactly? Because since they were following the Rabbi Yehuda Taka would have paskined, had it had the shiur of a revius, then it would be metame. Okay, now the Mishnah spoke about the status of spittle in Yerushalayim. And we learned that we presume that the spittle in Yerushalayim, aside of Shuka Elyon of Meir, is Tohoirim. Says the Gemara, hold on. That Loigozru Alarukin Shebi Yerushalayim, L'choira, he meant at all. Answers the Gemara, Ha'itman Aleidam Abba Mishem Yeshua ben Levi, Katzran Shal Nachrim Ha'yasham. As we began the Gemara, yes, the Chachamim did not decree the rabbinic Tumah and Rukin at all in Yerushalayim. But if circumstances was, like we mentioned above, that you had a bunch of goyim that had their business in a certain location, while they had their businesses there, then you have to say that there is tumah over there because midrabanan goyim have a din of azov. Doesn't contradict the Mishnah. It also means that this, it's not la'olam vad if the goyim would move the business to another place, or if Yidden would take over the whatever, then it would change. The Mishnah was said at a time that de facto there was filled with goyim over there, so of course there has to be this rabbinic tumah. This is already Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. So the Mishnah explained, Hatamei Mahalchim Shiboilus. Tummy people would walk, Shiboilus means in middle of the road. And it was the Tohidim that walked on the side of the road. And therefore, guys, we have to follow the gears of the Gra. Not a Pasha doesn't work. And therefore, Hatameim, another detail. When people who were tummy that were walking in the middle of the road, Mahalchin Stam, they didn't feel the responsibility to let anyone know that they're tummy. Because the presumption is you walk in the middle of the road, meaning you walk where the majority of the people are walking. Right now, you are not concerned with Tum and Tara. And the Hatohoirin, not only did they walk to the side of the road, but the onus was on them. They needed to tell everyone else, Chavre, Prushu, keep away from me, keep away from us. We're trying to remain Tar. However, B'Shas HaRegel, the first white line, everything flips. The Tohirim walked Shiboilus. The Tameim were the one that walks Minatzad. It was the Tohirim that did not have to make any statements because you needed to presume that Yidden in Yerushalayim were Tohirim. It was the Tameim that on them was the responsibility to say, Chevra, I'm Tamei, stay away from me. When the Mishnah spoke about this rabbinic Tumah on unattended Kalim, and then we added, did he not say that so why does the Mishnah say that the Kalim that are found derech Aliyah are Tohirim? What does that imply? Only derech Aliyah, because they're leaving the mikveh. That seems to apply that in Yerushalayim stam it's tamei. Really, it's a stira. The Babli elaborates more, because when the Mishnah says that Echiridas and Istamei is takamashma, only that Echiridas and Istamei, everyone else is tar. Then when you say that Echaliyasan, so what is it? So here the Mishnah explains, we spoke this out when we learned the Mishnah. Really, in Yerushalayim, Stam, Kalim are not tamei. However, there is one exception, that Mekivin, Shenimtsu, Derech Yirida, L'beis Tefilla. Okay, so then that's called Nasu Hoicheyach. There's like a demonstration. It's like a raya. It's a hoichacha that this keli for sure came from someone that was going to the mikveh for a reason, to be matayir kelim. And derech aliyasan, is not like derech yiridasim, but really derech aliyasin is like anywhere else in Yerushalayim. Abashol. Now the Mishnah gave an exception. There are 3 kelim that are always going to be tameim, even according to Rabbi Yehuda. What were the 3 kelim that were used in burials or in a cemetery? So the 3 kelim were sal, magrefa, and meritza. Meritza means a hammer. So now the Gemara says in semantics that meritza keli was called by Abba Shaul as a tzipoirin keli. Now, why did they call it tzipoirin? Why did they call it meritza? Explains the Gemara. Manda amar tzipoirin, because it was shaped like a fingernail, which means it was like wider in the bottom and it got pointy in the top. Manda amar meritza. The word meritza means a crusher, is because when they would dig graves, sometimes you encounter a rock and you have to crush through the rock. So maybe in locations where it wasn't so rocky, they would call it a tzipoirin. Maybe in Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is very rocky. When you make a new opening in Har HaZeisim, you have to crush through whatever's there. Koifetz, the final din in the Mishnah, was the difference between a koifetz and a sakin. And as we pointed out, the top line of the Amud is that if a koifetz is kshura l'sakin, our Mishnah was lenient. Points out the Gemara that a Braisa says the opposite. Machlikas Tanoim. That Tani we learned in a Braisa that if sakin kshura law, if a sakin is tied to a koifetz, then we don't say they both have the status of a sakin. Punkt fakert. Hareizu kemoiser has a din of a koifetz. We go l'chumra. All right, moving on now to the paroichesin that we have in the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Mishnah, paroiches, we're speaking here as an example. The dinim will be the same for the other ones. But the dinim of Tumah, we're speaking here about the paroiches that separated the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kachim. In the first Beis Hamikdash, there was a wall that was built that separated these 2 environments. In the second, by Yesheni, we, instead of a wall, we put a double curtain with one. The whole thing took up an amma space. But the Kohen Gadol would enter from an opening on one side, and he would walk through both curtains and then enter the Kodesh Kachim from the opening of the other side. In other words, neither of these curtains really went from wall to wall, but you were unable to look into the Kodesh Kachim because there was a curtain blocking you. When you were inside the Kodesh Kachim, you were unable to look into the Kodesh because the other curtain was blocking you as well. Says the Mishnah, Paroiches shenitmeis bevlad hatuma. So here we go. A Av has the koyach midoiraisa to be metama kelim. A Rishon Latuma, which is called a Vlad, a Rishon Midoiraisa cannot be Metama Kelim. However, since you can have a liquid Rishon, and there are liquids that have the status of an Av, which is an anomaly, but going back to the dinim of spittle, the spit or the urine or certain other bodily fluids of a zav and a zava and of a nida, they will be matama on the level of an av. And if that would touch a keli, it would be matama the keli. So came along the chachamim and they said that any liquid should be matame kelim midrabanan. But if the liquid only has a status of a rishon, what would the keli be? The keli would be a sheni midrabanan. Now that is very, very important, because if something that is tummy on the level of doiraisa, you have to take it out of the Beis Hamikdash to toivel it, because you have to remove tuma from the Beis Hamikdash. Furthermore, if something is tummy on a level midoiraisa, even after taking it to the mikvah, normally you have to wait until it's dark for you to be allowed to bring it back in. The paroiches that became nitma b'vlad tuma, which means it's only tummy midrabanan. But number one, you don't have to remove it from the Beis Hamikdash compound, and therefore madbilin oisoi bifnim. And indeed, the mikveh that was used by the Kohen Gadol, as we'll begin learning, God willing, soon in the new Masechta Yuma or Yoima, over that mikveh was large enough to bring in the paroiches. You did not need to remove it. And number two, even if for technical reasons you wanted a larger mikveh and you remove the paroiches from the holy area, so since it's only Tamei Midrabanan, you don't have to wait until the next day to bring it back. Umachnisin oisa miyad. But But, says the Mishnah in contrast, if the Peroiches became Tamei from something that's Taken Av, which means that it is Tamei Midoiraisa, then you can't toivel it inside. You have to remove it ASAP. Matbilin Oisei Bachutz, and you cannot bring it back in even after the Tefilla because you need head of Shemesh. V'shoitchen Oisa, they would hang it up to dry. They would hang it up in the area known as the Chayil, as we spoke about just not long ago, about the 13 breaches, that there was a soirek fence. In between the soirek fence and the Azara fence, that area is called the Chayil. That area you still may enter even though you don't yet have head of Shemesh. Head of Shemesh, but not further. You can't bring it in beyond the Chayil. Now, says the din, the Mishnah, another din, Gavaldik, there is a rabbinic rule, Nachar the Rabbanon today, that all kalim used in the Beis HaMikdash, even though they are brand new, and you know they are not tamei, they need to be toiveled. Similar like we have by a person, right? When a person goes to the mikvah, and then they the seventh day, and then they have to put him on the eighth day. Remember, we learned that there was another tefillah. Something new to enter the Beis HaMikdash needs a tefillah. So if the curtain is brand new, and therefore they took it to the mikvah midrabanan, then shoitchin oisa al gag ho itztaba, really, you don't need head of shemesh. But now you have to push it, let it dry. They dafka would hang it on top of the coverings of the benches that we had on Harabayis, which was an area that anyone in Yerushalayim was able to physically see. And they did that not because they were not allowed to bring it in closer. They did that kedei sheyira ha'ames malachta. They wanted everyone to see the beauty of the curtains, to see the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash, and whenever money was raised for the curtains, as it was, people would be more inspired to give money towards it. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, in the name of Rab Shimon ben Asgam, that I want you to know regarding the Peroiches, that Peroiches oivia tafach, it had the thickness of a tafach, which is amazing, which is huge. And al shivim ushtayim nimin negeres, and it was woven on a machine, on those weaving machines that had 72 heddle shafts. And every nima of a nima, every string was made out of really chav dalet chutim, 24 strands, and more elaboration in the Gemara in a moment, and a lot more in Yuma. And the total length of the curtain, we're speaking again about the curtain that was mavdil ben kodesh lekodesh kachim, was 40 ames, and the width was 20 ames. And umishmoinim v'shtayim riboy hoisenasis, it costed 820,000 golden dinars to make, and they would make 2 new ones every year. V'shtayim oisim b'chol shana. Because, like we mentioned, we're speaking here about the Peroiches being kodesh l'kodesh kachim, and there were 2 curtains. And if it needed to go to the mikvah because of its size and weight and thickness, you know how many people you needed? You needed to have 300 kohalim to toivel in it. And we're going to see, God willing, if we'll get to it today, if not, we'll get to it tomorrow, how this is one of the examples where Chazal sometimes use a guzma expression, but we'll get to that in the Gemara. So let's focus on the curtain. Why? Just to give an example for those of us here who are, by our talis gadol, by talis gadol, the tzitzis, if you look at it, your one strand of tzitzis is kaful shmoina. You'll notice. One strand of your tzitzis, if you'll see, it looks like it's twisted 2, but each one of those 2 is made out of 4. And that is as a remnant, a zeicher of how they would make the materials in the Beis HaMikdash, and beginning with the Gemara, that ilu amar chut, if the Torah would have used the word chut means one strand. However, if the Torah would use the word kaful, double, that would mean 2. When the Torah uses the word shazur, twisted, that means 3. But when the Torah uses the words mashazar, which is another word for twisted, that means double. Everyone is doubling. It goes from 1, not 3. 3 is not doubling. But from mashar is 3, shazur is 3, mashar is 6. Now, each one had 6 strands. But there were 4 types of materials, 4 types of fibers. What were the 4 types? Cheles, argamon, chevre, toilashani, and sheish. Mashazar. So mashazar means each one means there were 6 little cheles and threads that were twisted together into one. and 6 of argaman, and 6 of teila shani, and 6 of sheish linen, and then they
How does that relate to the tzitzis? How does that relate? How does it relate to the tzitzis?
If you're
Why do we have
wearing just a short baruch that it looks like you have 8 strands. Each one of your 8 strands has 8 strands. It's made that way. Look at your tzitzis. You're going to see that you can undo one, take out one. One has 2, one has 2, and each one of that 2 has 4. In the Beis Hamikdash, each one didn't have 2, had 4, and each one of the 4 had 6. So that's 24. 6 times 4 is 24. That's the most moderate, that's the most lenient, skinny opinion. We learned in a Brayso, no, each one was 32. And what was their cheshbon? If it would say chut, when God uses the words chut, or Chazal say chut, that means taka only one. There's nothing twisted, there's only one. Whenever you use the word double, kafel, it means 2. Whenever you use the word shazur, here we're doubling. Each one doubles. Don't go from 2 to 3. Shazur goes to 4. Mashzar doubles 4 to 8. Now again, like we mentioned, each one was 8. But how many were there? There were 4. Tchelis, Argaman, Toila, Shani, and Sheish. So 8 times 4. So Oibazoi, so Mikan, and then you had Arba. So therefore Mikan, Tulas and Utrain, there were 32. Opinion that holds that each thread was even thicker. Tani, we learned in the Brayso, no, each one was 48. How do you get to the 48? If the Torah, when the Torah uses the words chut means 1. Kafel means shnayim. Aliyah, braided, if such a word is used, that means 3. Shazur now is the double of the Kliyah, 6. And now Mashar is double of Shazur, that's 12. Now we have 12 times 4. And then you have Arba'ah, that means if each one was 12, each one of the Tchelas, Argaman, Toila, Shani, and Sheish, we can have Arba'im v'Tanya. Weiter, says the Gemara, Kosav Echor Omer, in one pasuk it says, regarding the curtain, the Torah calls it Ma'asei Roikeim, the work of a embroiderer. In one pasuk it says Ma'aseh Choshev, the work of a designer. Why does the Torah change these expressions? What does embroidery mean? What does designer mean regarding the in materials? Explains the Gemara, Ma'aseh Roikeim. The work of an embroiderer is when you make a design out of these threads, when you weave them together. But parts of echad, ma'aseh choshev, whenever the Torah uses the words ma'aseh choshev, a designer's work, that's where you already have something a lot more sophisticated. Shtei partzufa is 2 different faces, 1 on each side. And here we have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. And here again, we have to learn the Gra. So I'm going to go to the Gimel. The Gimel is all the way in the bottom of the Amid. What are the 2 opinions? Chad Omar, Ma'aseh Roikeim, I'm reading in the Gra now, Daf Chav Beis, means Ari Mikan, that they made the image of a lion on one side, Shkoyach, that's very good, and V'chalak Mikan, and the other side had nothing. The other side had nothing means if you looked on the opposite side of the curtain, it didn't have to have anything on it. Ma'aseh Choshev means, when you say it's a work of a designer, Shtei Partzufos, that Ari Mikan va'Ari Mikan. It was a lion here and a lion there, which is already amazing. But you know something? V'charna Amar, the other one says it's more than that, much more than that. Ma'aseh Roikeim means, one face means each side had a design, but it was the same design from both sides, which is relatively easy. It was the same design, maybe facing opposite directions. Ari Mikan v'Ari Mikan. Ma'aseh Choshev means that you use the same threads. We're not only speaking about weaving the curtain, we're speaking about using those threads to create a design. We're not only speaking about creating a design, but on one side they created the design of a lion, and on the other side they created the design of an eagle, which is amazing. That normally there's nothing not kosher in the Beis Hamikdash, but it's not so when it comes to lions, and it's not so when it comes to eagles, because these are the animals that we have on the MERCAVA. And ad hayoyim hazeh, it's common that you have either on a pareiches or even sometimes on the mantle of a Sefer Torah. In shuls, you have images of lions. It all comes from over here, because these were the images that we had embroidered right on the beautiful workmanship of the curtains. Okay, Chavre, we'll stop over here. Say that. And God willing, tomorrow we are going to make the siyum on Shekalim to be continued.
Did they have a dog?
Thank you.
Did they have a dog on the curtains in the second
No
temple?
dogs, no dogs, never. There's no dogs in the MERCAVA.
In the second temple curtains.
No. We're speaking about the second temple. In the first temple, Baruch, there was no curtain. The first temple here, there was a wall. We had lions, eagles, and sometimes we would have the image of, I don't know if it was in the Beis HaMikdash, but you have in the MERCAVA the ox. Those are the four faces.
Rabbi,
yeah.
How is there a machlokes about the dam of Nevela, whether it's metame? If they had the story of the people being on the regal walking through the marketplace where they were killing all the donkeys, so clearly it was not metame because the chachamim said nothing. So
because now we know it's a machlokes tanoim. Clearly, those chachamim subscribe to those shitas that it's not metame, but it's a machlokes tanoim. We have to know what a paskin like.
Right, when you tell a story, that's a story that's brought down. Isn't that usually the halacha? So why is there machlokes amarayim afterwards? Yeshua, maybe this, that, whatever. We have a story, and it says that they weren't metame.
The way I understand, Danny, is that when Rebbe writes a story in the Mishnah, that's Rebbe's way of saying that that's the halacha. But I don't think it's every time there is a story that the punkt rabbanan there paskin correctly. Lavdafka. Your rule is a formulation of a Mishnah thing. Rebbe brings a machlokes that he says, Amaisa, Rebbe is saying that I paskin like that. And I'll tell you even more than that, Danny. Who says that every time Rebbe says Amaisa in the Mishnah, who says we always paskin like Rebbe? It just means that Rebbe says that's the halacha. We don't always pass on like Rebbe either. Even when there's a Maisa in the Mishnah.
Good day, Rebbe.
Good day, Rebbe.